Alright, hello everybody, and welcome to AJ Teaches. Today is a little bit different, so I'm going to try and show you how I do my drawings. The first thing, obviously, we got to find is the reference, and I'm going to do this here, Spritzy. We're doing a Pokemon because they're easy to draw, and it should just, be a lot of fun. So I use two monitors, so we're going to spread that over there. So to start with, let's get the new file. So what we're going to do to make a new file is I'm going to set it to 3000 by 3000 pixels at 300 dpi. That's a good size because it lets me adjust it as I like, and if I do end up printing them, we have a very good size to play with there, plus I can crop any way that I want. And here I'm just adjusting my canvas a little bit. I'll pick my brush and make sure that that's the right size for the line art, which is all that we're doing today, by the way, is just the line art, and that seems to be pretty okay. I'll make a new layer, but I generally only paint on one layer for the entirety of the painting. And because I never want to really use black, because we're doing the Spritzy, we're going to choose sort of a dark red color for the outline. That way, when I draw around with a lighter touch, you get a nice sort of shadow, which is not going to be exactly the same as the shadow of the Spritzy, but as you can see, it comes out with a really warm tone, which is going to be pretty close to what we want for the shadow of the Spritzy. And we'll get into this more with the next video where we go over painting. But once I got my general base tone, I'll pick the lighter color, and that'll give me a good sense of contrast for between the light and dark. And, if it's close enough to the original painting, I won't have to adjust it too much. Once I go over the shadows with that light color, you can see it's a lot closer. But sometimes I want something different. Sometimes I want a bit more color in the shadows, and I'll just pick something else if I think it looks good. Like I said, this is just sort of a little test so you can see where I'm going with it, or where it might end up. For this test, it's not exactly the same, but right now it really doesn't matter because, again, we're just doing the line art. So let me just get this out of here. It's not important. So just delete that layer and start a new one. And all right, let's get started with the line art. Got to pick my dark color one more time, and before I get started too, I need to make sure how exactly do I want to draw this Spritzy, right? Like, I know for my style, I'm going to add a little more detail to the feathers. You got the little poofy poop thing up on top. The fur is really important. It's going to be separate from what the feathers look like, of course, and then he's got those down there. The feet are going to be either claw-like, or I don't know, I might just leave them as is, and that's something that, it'll evolve. And then, of course, the mask is, I want it to stay a little more plasticine, the eye more my style, a little darker, but still cute. We'll see. Things can evolve as we get started. So let's get started. When I start, generally, I don't do things the same way as other people. I'll start with what I think is the most important part. Like, I won't do a huge shape of the whole head, right? Like, I'm starting with just the nose, the schnoz part of the mask, and as you'll see, I'll draw some lines, and they don't work out for me, and I'll change them. And I use undo quite a lot when I'm working on these, at least in the line art part. And I probably shouldn't, just because I can always paint over it later, but it saves time in the end. So once I've got the basic shape down for what I think is gonna help me determine the angle, I'll use any other good signifiers of that. In this case, it's the little poof on top, right? So I've got that basic shape down for the mask, and then I've got his face angle down a little bit. So then I'm gonna draw the poofy next, so you get a greater sense of, yeah, this is definitely a downward angle, as if such a thing was super important. But it helps me stay consistent when I look at what might be the most apparent part of where he's looking, where he's coming down. And this applies to every face, not just necessarily this gigantic face of a Pokemon, but human faces as well. Like I'll start with like a nose before I do the eyes or the eyebrows before I don't just do a huge chin shape to get to where I want it to look, right? The reason why I'm drawing the eye now is just because it seems to be, for me at least, the next part that interests me, and that's sort of the way that I do things. Is I'll move from one part of the drawing to the next without really thinking too much about where I am, and more about what am I going to have fun drawing at this stage of it before I move on to the next stage of it. The reason why I'm adding the shadow to the eye right now is because I want to see a little bit more finality to it before I'm actually at the painting stage. And I'm going to end up deleting that or changing or painting over it anyways. And I know that, but for me, to see it even at this early stage makes me feel like, all right, good, I'm making some progress. This is starting to look pretty decent. So at this point, I'm fairly happy with how that's turning out, so it's time to start going around with the main body. As I'm drawing that, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about the specifics of what I'm using. I draw with an Intuos 3, which is very, it's a common tablet. A lot of people use them. It's getting pretty old. I'd love to use a Cintiq, but that's what I got. I have a very large one. It's 9x12, rests on my lap, and I'm happy with it. I'm drawing with Photoshop CS6 Extended. The only reason why I'm using that as opposed to one of the earlier versions, I really do like using CS2, I don't know, I'm a fan, but is just because it has really great animation controls with some extensions. Like I have one called Animdecim, which is really great, and I'll link you right here to a short Garfield loop animation that I did some time ago. So anyway, back to the drawing. As I'm drawing the feathers, I know that in the original, Spritzy drawing, they're not very detailed, but I like to make them a little bit more. And while most of that is going to come from the painting part, even in the line art, I can add like little divots where there would be, the extension of the feathers, and all that's just going to save me time a little bit later as far as the thought process behind when I'm doing the feathers, and, make it a little bit more abstract with the outline, the silhouette, make it look like even now you can tell that, oh, these are like legitimate feathers, not just big old nubs, or something like that. And same goes for upper, when I've got the little hair tufts, like you can see, oh, that's definitely fur. It's not just little nubs. And you'll also notice too, I'm a little more halfway through the drawing, so I'm more confident in my line work. I don't use undo quite as often, unless I absolutely feel like I need to. And so then we get to the part where I wasn't so sure what I'm going to do as far as the feet are concerned, because I kind of wanted to make them claw-like, but I don't know if that'll really fit with it. And it's important that they're proportional to the rest of the body. And I want to also make them interesting instead of like in the original, they're kind of just two little down spikes. So in mine, I'm going to make them, the back foot going behind the front foot, and that'll make it look a little interesting. I'm not really too happy with the eye, so I'm going to paint over it with white. The only reason I do that instead of erasing is just because I'm lazy. It's just easier to pick the white color and do that than change brushes to the eraser. And I know that I'm going to paint over it anyway, so it doesn't really matter. So I'm going to try and make it a little bit more creepy than I had before. It's always creepy when you put the pupil in the center of the eye, and even though the original has that and they made it cute, they got that big highlight on there. I'm probably not going to put the highlight. Add a little more detail, especially when it comes to the eyelashes, which I wouldn't even put in there, but they are sort of essential to the original design. I can still make sure you have the individual bristles coming off, because that'll at least give it a little bit more realism to it and keep it, again, interesting and in keeping with the rest of my style. I was going to add a little bit dark just to give that contrast again for that finality, but it's not really necessary, and I still have other things to worry about. At this point, we're mostly done with the line art, but for the sake of this show, I'm going to do a little bit more cleaning up, a little more detailing things. I'm looking at it as a whole now instead of whatever individual parts. So any shapes I'm not really super happy with, I can fix up the tuft on top. I need to change that up just a little bit. Again, it's not that important. And when I'm painting, I'm probably going to just change it anyways. But in the line art for this episode, we're gonna keep it at that. That said, I hope you enjoyed what I had to show you today. If you learned even one thing, then I suppose this was a success. So that would be pretty nice. If leave a comment below telling me what you would like me to talk about, or if you have any questions about my process or anything like that. Whether or not this does well, people have been asking a lot about a teaching series, and it's something I'd like to think about. I might. This one I recorded after I did the drawing, so next time I'll probably record while I'm drawing, just for the sake of so I know what I'm talking about when I'm doing it. But please consider again donating to my Patreon if you want to see this be a regular thing. Otherwise, we will go back to a little thing, which I still would like to do more with. But for now, it's going to be whatever it is. I really can't describe it too much anymore. Thanks for watching, and I'll speed up to the end of this line art. Pew, 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 and here we are at the end.